What's up guys, this is VinylicPuma, and it's been a while since I made a Borderlands 3 predictions video, but since we're closely approaching E3 2018, and it's already in the month of May, I figured I could go ahead and give you guys some of my predictions before the game is ultimately revealed. Now before we start, I want to stress that this is a predictions video, and there is a possibility that I could be entirely wrong on everything that I'm going to be talking about here. With that said, I am going to be using a fair amount of evidence to support some of my predictions, and I think by the end of this video, many of you will end up agreeing with me on at least some of the things I'm going to say here, if not all of them. As always though, if there are any predictions that I missed or you just think I'm wrong, feel free to leave it in the comments section below. But in no particular order, let's go ahead and start with my first Borderlands 3 prediction, and that is that Borderlands 3 will get a reveal trailer before E3. While there will likely be a lot of highly anticipated games that get revealed at E3 this year, I doubt that Borderlands 3 will be one of them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Borderlands 3 won't make an appearance at this year's E3 at all, but I suspect what will most likely happen is that the game will get revealed before the event occurs. Aside from the fact that 2K, Gearbox, and Take-Two Interactive rarely ever make appearances at E3, a lot of game companies frequently reveal their games before the event occurs. As an example, Far Cry 5 last year got a reveal on May 26th, which was basically before E3, and every Call of Duty release since the very first Black Ops is usually revealed in May, with the exception, I believe, of Black Ops 3, which was in late April. Also, other major releases in previous years like Destiny 2 and Battlefield 1 were revealed in May before E3 of that year. With this in mind, I suspect that Gearbox and 2K could put out a reveal trailer for Borderlands 3 sometime in May 2018, as this is something that many other game companies do. Given what we know about Black Ops 4's reveal and how it will be on May 14th, 2018, I am going to predict that Borderlands 3's reveal will come later. That way, Gearbox and 2K can avoid getting caught up in the ensuing wave of hype that COD and other games could possibly generate. Okay, so my next prediction is going to be about Borderlands 3's appearance at E3. While I think Borderlands 3's reveal trailer will probably be out before E3, I do predict that we're going to see some of the first official Borderlands 3 gameplay at this year's E3 event. And my reasoning for this is that historically, Borderlands 2, the pre-sequel, and even Gearbox's Battleborn IP have all made appearances at the show, showing off some gameplay within a year of the game's release. If you look around on YouTube, you can find IGN Live or GameSpot interviews with Randy Pitchford or from members of the now defunct 2K Australia that show off E3 gameplay for all three of these games. Ultimately, because this appears to be a pattern of repeatable behavior, my guess is that we'll see some gameplay of Borderlands 3 at E3 2018 this year. After all, if Borderlands 3 is supposed to release by the end of this fiscal year, meaning that it should release by March 2019, Gearbox is going to have to show off some gameplay sooner rather than later, and I think E3 would be the perfect place to do it. Okay, so next prediction. Now, about a month ago, there were a bunch of rumors that Microsoft and the Xbox division were going to have an exclusive marketing deal for Borderlands 3. And while these rumors were ultimately squashed by Randy Pitchford himself, I do think it's possible that Gearbox and 2K could possibly have a marketing deal with Sony for a number of reasons. For starters, Battleborn had an exclusive deal with Sony as Battleborn's open beta was available an entire 5 days before it was available on Xbox One or PC. Not only that, but one of the first DLC characters was available to PS4 owners for free, provided that they participated in said beta. It's also worth mentioning that both Battleborn and the Borderlands series publisher, which is ultimately Take-Two Interactive, has a pretty good relationship with Sony currently, as Rockstar's Red Dead Redemption 2 is reported to have timed PS4 exclusive content. With this in mind, it's probably more likely that we'll see some type of PS4 exclusivity for the PlayStation platform that might not be available to everyone else. Granted, we're going to have to wait until Gearbox goes ahead and announces the game to know whether there will be PS4 exclusive content or not, but my prediction will be that Sony will get some kind of exclusive marketing deal given Take-Two's and Sony's current relationship. Now, let's go ahead and get away from reveals, E3 predictions, and marketing deals, and actually take the time to talk about the game itself. While this may not be too much of a prediction for some of you, I'm going to guess that Borderlands 3 is going to have a full suite of melee weapons. Why? Well, just check out this interesting Twitter post from the official Borderlands Twitter. As you can see, it basically shows this interesting weapon called the Varkid Vaporizer, which appears to be a tennis racket connected to some kind of battery terminal. There's another one from about a month earlier that features what appears to be a meat grinder called the Skag Spiralizer, and given that both appear to be made by Bandit, which is a weapons manufacturer, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that they are in fact usable weapons of some sort. I guess it's also possible that these are going to be special one-time use items or something else, but my hope is that they are actually usable melee weapons. After all, I think we could have some pretty fun builds in the next game that are totally melee-centric. We'll see, but in the meantime, I do think it's going to be pretty cool if we have somebody like Krieg running around with an electrified tennis racket, beating the crap out of Varkids. Speaking of tweets about weapons, I'm going to predict that Borderlands 3 will either introduce a brand new weapons manufacturer, or they'll bring back an old one. This is based on an old tweet from last year, but Gearbox put out an interesting tweet that pictures the Swordsplosion, Cyber Eagle, and a Hyperion E-Tech pistol with the following caption that reads, quote, 10 weapon manufacturers, gazillions of guns, and 400% more awesome. Now, what's interesting about this is that if you've played Borderlands 2 in the pre-sequel, both of those games have only 8 weapons manufacturers, with them being Torg, Vladov, Jacobs, Maliwan, Tediore, Hyperion, Bandit, and Dahl. However, in the original Borderlands, there were 10 or 11, which include the aforementioned, along with the Iridian, Atlas, SNS, and Gearbox manufacturers. Perhaps I'm reading too much into this, but I think it's a sign, and personally, I wouldn't mind seeing Atlas return, as those weapons were really cool, and if Gearbox is gonna allow the Ajax Ogre to return, that is gonna be amazing. We'll just have to wait and see, but you do have to admit that this particular Twitter post is pretty strange. Alright, so this next prediction is going to be at a bit of a 2-in-1, but I'm going to go ahead and make the prediction that Borderlands 3 is going to take place well after the events of Borderlands 2, much like Borderlands 2 took place about 5 years after the events of the original Borderlands. The big reason I think this is because I think the character or NPC that was shown in Borderlands 3's tech demo is Tiny Tina. Now, I do have to admit that I didn't originally think this was the case, but after looking at one of the particular scenes from the tech demo, and I'll pull it up right here so you can see it on screen, if you look at the character's hair, it kind of looks like white hair, and obviously it's a girl, so maybe it's Tiny Tina. However, the other thing that kind of stood out to me is if you look to the left, and you see that there's a little skull and crossbones, you'll notice there's like a pink bow on top, which could also signify that it's Tiny Tina. I don't know if she's an NPC or a playable character, but if that is Tiny Tina in the tech demo, this would basically guarantee that the events of Borderlands 3 will take place well after Borderlands 2. But even if it's not, I'm looking forward to finding out who this particular NPC is. Another prediction that I have is that Handsome Jack will return in some capacity. Now, while I don't think he will be the main villain, I could see him returning for the next game. Not only was Handsome Jack an extremely popular character from Borderlands 2, he was arguably the face of the franchise for the pre-sequel and Tales from the Borderlands as well. Speaking of Tales from the Borderlands, if we ever figure out what happened to Rhys and Fiona, we'll likely also figure out the fate of Handsome Jack as well. After all, in episode 5 of Tales from the Borderlands, Rhys has one final confrontation with the Handsome AI in the ruins of the Helios moonbase. Reese manages to survive the encounter and then rips out his cybernetic implants. And at this point, the player is presented with a choice. They can either destroy the implant that contains the handsome AI, or they can choose to keep it. My thinking is, if there is a canonical ending to Tales from the Borderlands, I can guarantee you that Reese ultimately decides to keep the handsome AI. That way, Gearbox has the opportunity to include Handsome Jack in Borderlands 3 if they decide to do so. It'll also be a pretty cool cameo for old fans like myself. Okay, so my final prediction is going to be that a fan favorite character is going to die in the game's plot. To be honest, this prediction isn't really based on a whole lot, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw just one or a couple of fan favorite characters get killed during Borderlands 3's plot. After all, we've seen this happen in Borderlands 2 with both Helena Pierce, Roland, and Angel, and we even saw it again in Tales from the Borderlands when we saw Scooter get killed off. This time, though, I think fans are going to feel it a lot more than they did with Roland or Angel, as many current Borderlands 2 players got into the franchise with Borderlands 2, and have grown quite fond of characters like Claptrap, Tiny Tina, Sir Hammerlock, or even some of the playable Vault Hunters like Brick, Mordecai, Lilith, Axton, Salvador, Maya, or Zero. Seeing one of your favorite NPCs or playable characters die could prove to be really heartbreaking. However, given the track record of the Borderlands games so far, it seems fairly likely that this could potentially happen. Hopefully, it's not your personal favorite. Alright guys, that's going to wrap up this particular video. If you liked this video, feel free to leave a like, click the bell to join the notification squad, and as always, thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Take care, and I'll see y'all next time.